Okay, are you guys can see the slide?
Yes, sir, we do.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir, we
sorry.
can.
Thank you so much. So as I think just to start from, as I said, I actually am not an economist. I don't know much about economy, as I've been introduced by as an evolutionary biologist. I have a bit of background in education, but what actually want to really talk about is ecosystem, biodiversity, and the role of ecosystem restoration, and how this can contribute. In all aspects or all areas or the sectors of our economy. And I'll just present few slides or इसमें कोई I'll use a mixed language as Jinnah sab used, so I can speak in English, and my Urdu is equally bad as my English is, so don't laugh at anything, please, if I do any mistake. So I will, sorry, I was on the last slide. You know how clumsy can be sometime on this Zoom meeting. So as you know, so I will actually start from very basic information that perhaps I'm not sure how many of you guys have a science background, but at least you have all of them studied science in your school or in your inter level. So as we start from ecosystem, so ecosystem as is evolved or originated from two Greek words, the oikos meaning house and the systema that is connected. As we see in the house, if we take example of a family house, everyone is connected to each other with relations, dependence, or interdependence. The same in our in our environment. Everything living and non-living organisms are connected with each other. So especially if we define it to ecosystem is a geographic area where plants, animals, and other organisms, which can be microbes, fungal, or other organisms, and non-component and non-living components like weather, landscape, work together to form a bubble of life. So that we see from a smallest ecosystem to the biggest level of globe, all these biotic and abiotic components work together to maintain and sustain life. So if we look at a global scale, we would have five different kinds of ecosystems, which is atmosphere. We divide the ecosystems, our global ecosystems, into five major categories: atmosphere, freshwater, terrestrial, marine, and subterranean. So within or underground, all these microbes and all other organisms which are growing, we know that a lot of invertebrates are growing and surviving underground and also help to maintain the fertility of the soil. So then comes biodiversity. So I'm starting from this basically two basic concepts. So ecosystem and biodiversity is so much relevant to current time that without talking, without knowing, or without um, working on these points, we cannot do anything. So the biodiversity, as we see, bio mean life and diversity mean the forms of life. So all forms of life from at our levels, that is from the ecosystems to species or genetic level, which can be evolutionary, ecological, cultural diversity. So when we talk about evolutionary diversity, so all taxons or living organisms are basically evolutionary diversity. Ecological diversity is the landscapes, landform, geographical regions, and all these are geographic ecological biodiversity. So all these again work together to sustain life on Earth. And how we see that basically the biodiversity is basically the pedestal on which health of our ecosystem is maintained, and health of the ecosystem actually is responsible for providing all ecosystem services that starts from the pure cleaning of water, or there are some ecosystem services written like food, water purification, climate regulation. So all these ecosystem services basically then provide resilience to the global ecosystem. And if we have a resilient a global ecosystem which can adapt or resist to the threat of the climate change, only then our society, our ecosystem, our economy can support or flourish to work towards these 17 goals of SDGs that we always talk, as Janasa very well explained about these SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. So what we see is actually is the same as our health of our house or a family is not good, we cannot do anything. So basically, we have to have a resilience and capacity within the house, within the family to resist all these epidemics, all these diseases, or all these economic or environmental shocks. So exactly the same way our globe, our ecosystem works. If it has the resilience, it has the power to adapt and change. And you know that adaptation always comes with diversity. If you don't have the diversity of skills, if economic situation changes, you cannot adapt to the new opportunities of the jobs or something like this. So you have to diversify your skills. So same is our ecosystem. If there are different forms of life which can support each other, which can interconnect or and develop ability of interdependence, then our ecosystem can survive and it can. So rest everything comes. So we say that if we have our Earth planet planetary ecosystem is working, then human can survive, and then comes the talk about all these SDGs. If we are not, if we cannot live on this planet anymore, then everything is gone. So first we have to do what we have to do. We have to work on the ecosystem, on the health of our ecosystem. So as you have already know, perhaps most of you or Janasab surely know that this decade has been declared as the ecosystem restoration decade, starting from 2021 to 2030. So we have 10 years, and I think in the talk, Janasab also mentioned somewhere that we have now, instead of 15, we have 10 years. And what we see that because if we see, okay, the industrialization started in 19th century, but this over exploitation and all this capitalism economy basically started in last 40 to 50 years. In these last 40 to 50 years, we have destroyed or degraded our ecosystem. 25% of the world ecosystem, which includes our marine or terrestrial or atmospheric ecosystem. And we, by this, we have basically affected about 3.2 billion people over the world. So degradation of ecosystem is simplify के वो जो भी इकोसिस्टम की सर्विसेज हैं वो पूरी तरह से प्रोवाइड नहीं कर रहा, वो उस हमें सस्टेनेबल फूड सप्लाईज नहीं हमारे मेंटेन हो पा रही, हमारी पोल्यूशन और ये जो डिजीजेस और पैथोजन के खिलाफ रेजिस्टेंस थी हमारे इकोसिस्टम के अंदर, वो खत्म हो रही. So something like that, all ecosystem services are affected, and by this in turn 3 billion or over a 3 billion people are directly or indirectly affected. And we are having a loss of about 6.3 trillion per year. So we human being, as अगर आप जानते होंगे कुरान मजीद में भी कि इंसान हमेशा एक बड़ा जल्दबाज है. कुरान की आयत का मुझे सही तरह से याद नहीं है तर्जुमा, लेकिन उसका मफहूम कुछ इस तरह से है कि इंसान जो है बेसब्रा है. इसी तरह हम basically whole capitalist economy is basically based on this kind of notion that we collect, we develop ourselves, we develop the capital, and what we were doing in this last 40-50 years, we were developing the capital, we are focusing on the more money, but at the cost of our ecosystems. For we have destroyed the healthy planetary ecosystem. That's why we are so this pandemic is not the first one. So we would be, there is a, overall consensus in scientific community that this is basically now after few years or very quickly we are having so many of these environmental crises, including these new pandemics, new viruses, because our ecosystem is broken. It cannot so much maintain, it doesn't have the resilience to fight back and something like so. Coming now basically, so that was some kind of a background I was trying to set, that biodiversity, ecosystem, degradation of ecosystem, how it started, and how the regeneration or restoration of ecosystem is basically connected with this SDGs. As we see from this map that this map shows basically all these global priority areas where ecosystem efforts can be, restoration efforts can be focused, and you see from red to blue. So red is the highest priority areas, and you see these, most of these red areas basically are in Asia, Africa, or Latin America. So all you see in the upper European or American region are either blue or they are either kind of this off-white color. So what we see basically, it has been not only our fault, because during colonial era and post-colonial era, and especially during this last couple of decades, we have been become a food basket. We are producing raw material for the West, and we are producing like palm oil production. You see, you take other new fancy fruits that the West is depending on all the time. They are all produced in these Asiatic or African countries. And what we are doing basically, we are cutting forest, we are destroying our ecosystem, we're trying to put as much as fertilizers or other inorganic or pesticides into our ecosystem, and so that we can have more growth, more production. And all this production is going into the West, and they are keeping their ecosystem. What I see here while living in Germany, most of their ecosystem is basically left on its own. So they are already regenerating their ecosystem from last 20 to 30 years, but they are not over exploiting their ecosystem, their lands or other ecosystem resources. So what I also previously said in one or two previous slide, that basically as the health of the house is important to maintain or to absorb all kinds of shocks, environmental shocks, similarly our planet needs healthy biosphere. And healthy biosphere basically can sustain society. And then you see these eight SDGs that are directly or indirectly related to society. And then healthy society can sustain a healthy economy. And then there comes the four SDGs, which is this, the one of that we are working now, the decent working and economic growth. So what we see here again, so the pedestal and the base is biosphere. And if if we're doing anything at the cost of losing or degrading our biosphere, we cannot go on like this for maybe another 20, 30 years. And our future generation, there is no way they can basically get it back. So what we have to do, as you know, and I already told that there is maximum we have 10 to 20 years to reverse all these things so that we can again develop a resilience in our ecosystem. So I would just give one example of ecosystem. So basically it's a landscape or terrestrial ecosystem, what we call it, where it comes different parts of the ecosystem, of this land ecosystem. So we have mountainous areas, we have plain areas, we have the river or watershed areas. So we have degraded this land ecosystem. And what was the priorities? As I already said, we prioritize the economic productivity, and at the cost of the degradation of these lands. And as we see the causes, the crops, uh, we try to maximize the crop production, we over intensifies the agriculture, and we cut our forest. Again, you see that we did not justly developed the areas. We focused our development on urban centers, and all these rural centers are basically left alone. And the people have to, because the climate shock or all this environmental degradation is more intensively happening in the rural areas. And they, when there is all this economic climatic change is happening, patterns of weathers are changing, their crop productions are failing. So what they're doing, they're simply moving to the urban centers, and there is a more pressure on our urban centers. And if we try to develop our rural areas, there would be no much pressure on the urban centers. So, but when there is a lot urbanization, then of course everything happen like Karachi, that what we see, that there is a little bit rain and we see that whole Karachi is swamped with this rainwater. And then, the extraction of industry, we see that our cement industry, our water industry, all they, what they're doing, they're extracting the fresh water from either lakes, rivers, or groundwater, and they're using and selling this resource without returning any single penny back to to the society or to the ecosystem. And then came a climate change, and what we see that our production of foods is decreasing, water short storage poor, biodiversity is losing, and organic and inorganic components. So what we see again, there has been a lot of some work being done in Pakistan. We are trying at least to grow more trees, but what the people in the West are talking is not to increase the tree cover, but rather work on the landscape as a whole, divide the whole landscape into certain sectors. Some sectors should be left alone only for the biodiversity, or a conservation center, or restoration functionality, and some centers should be utilized as a sustainable agriculture, something like this. So that's how we can basically revive or regenerate our landscape ecosystems. So as I said, there has been different forms of the ecosystem. As forest, we are losing globally about 4.7 million hectare forest every year, and mostly it's because this loss is not happening in the West. This loss is not happening in Europe. This loss is happening in Africa, Asia, or Latin America, because all these are basically, there is intensification of agriculture, overproduction of these crops and stuff. And then the farmlands, if you see, we are doing monoculture. We want to grow tons of this wheat grain or some other monoculture crops. So that's also basically destroying our farmland. So we have to work on that as well. So similarly, the rivers and lakes, we have polluted, oceans, and the peatlands. There has been no work being done on peatlands. Recently, there has been some I think ideas been floated by the government to develop these wetland areas, or some of those form of wetland areas in Pakistan we have as a kind of mangrove forest. So there has been some work, but as you see, these peatlands are only 3% of the planet, but they store 30% carbon in the soil. And if we lose these peatlands, all the carbon will be released into the atmosphere, and with the increase of carbon dioxide or carbon in the atmosphere, we will have more global warming and more shifts in climate patterns. And then again, you build on the cities on concrete infrastructure. You have to reduce concrete infrastructure. You have to increase the green belts, but we have to green our city centers and also other later. So what actually, then again, I would try to put what we actually, so I'm talking about a lot about restoration. Okay, everyone say that where the money will come from, but the problem is money is not the issue. We have to basically as I said previously, if the health of the family is not good, nothing is going to work. The economy is not going to work. So only thing is we have to pour money into the ecosystem restoration. As you know, that some of the figures you can see here, if we put about $3,000 into tropical forest land, what we get out as an outcome or as a benefit is $148,000 every year. So we get 56% more revenues if we put the money that we are putting into it. Similarly, if we invest on the lakes and the rivers, if we invest $4,000 a year in a lake or river ecosystem, what we get about 70,000 more benefits in the form of economics. So all the benefits that we're getting from basically are directly or indirectly basically growing our economies. If the growing economies mean we having more employment, we have more money to develop the capital. So what exactly Janasa was also talking about the capital. What we are currently focusing is we are talking capital in the sense of money. In the capital, what the West is working is basically to work on the human capital. So we have a population, we have a huge young population. I don't know, it's something like millions, or 30 million or 20 million, something like the people are around 20s to 30s. So we have to invest in that capital, so to change into a human capital so that it can earn money for us, for the ecosystem, for the country. So there are some statistics. I don't want to go into all of these statistics. All these ecosystem, from mangroves to tropical forests, the amount of money we are putting into the ecosystem, we are getting many more, even like 50 to 100 times more economic benefits out of these. So what we have to, you know what, again, we are short-sighted. We cannot wait for a year to 2 or 5 years. We want to have everything today. That's what the problem is. So because if ecosystem will take a time, it will take maybe 5 to 10 years to revive and to give back all these benefits that we are investing now today. So there is in the bottom right and left corner, you see two pictures. Basically it's the same Loess Plain from China. So where they started investing in this ecosystem, which is basically in the 80s and 90s. And you see they dramatically changed it over the period of 20 to 30 years. From a barren area, it has completely turned around into green, lush landscape, which supports all kind of diversity in those areas. And of course, this economy of that region has completely turned around from a poor to a really high income areas of the China. And then I think it's like maybe one or two, the second last slide. As we see that all these areas which we are trying to develop by investing in the ecosystem or ecosystem restoration, how they are related or connected with these SDGs. So as I said that biodiversity conservation is directly connected with the 6, 14 and 15. Similarly, we reverse and degradation and improve the food security. And we because if we invest in the ecosystem, we get better lands, and the improved land would give us more food security, so there will be less failure of the crops. And we will have like this two, and the third, like the health of the people would be good, because if they are properly fed, and then the zero hunger. And similarly, the building natural capital, as I was talking about, we have to work on not only on this environmental capital, but we also have to work on the human capital, and both would contribute to this SDG 1 and 8. So it's a growth and economy, no poverty thing. And then if we have all this sustainable timber production, because if we're talking about the land ecosystem, so all this energy supply still in countries like us is coming. Most of the energy production is done either by raw burning of the wood or by coal. So again, we are adding. So basically, again, roughly, I'm saying that I will sum up this slide again with one line. Ecosystem restoration is a winning investment. With every $1 spent, what we bring $10 to $15 in return. And I believe it's much more than that. It's a very cautious estimation, but perhaps it would be even 2 times more than the what we is written here. And again, I'm saying that everything, so I tried actually for you guys, basically you guys from academia. So I tried to basically quote all sources, or most of these are basically from the research articles or some verified sources. And so they're reliable. Again, I'm talking about the same thing is basically in another form, like how this restoration can improve different SDGs or help to contribute to the different SDGs. And you can very well see basically from gender equality to all these poverty is basically directly related clean water. And so I would not again try to describe each and every detail of the slide, but it's self-explanatory that restoration is basically contributing to most of these SDGs. But the problem is how these restoration things can work. So basically, most important things we have to basically engage all the stakeholders, primary stakeholders, secondary stakeholders, and tertiary stakeholders. So primary stakeholders are the people who are actually living in those ecosystems, which are basically directly at the threat due to this climate fluctuations and all these shift in weather patterns. So until we ask them, okay, what is exactly your problem? We always go with to them a solution. We never ask them what exactly is your problem. So what we have to give them, we have to give them a sense of participation, not like something like we go them and we try to advise them, you are a fool and we are coming with the good things for thee, we are coming with the better management plans. That's also kind of basically frighten them and brings a level of distrust between the people who are trying to help them and the people who are primary stakeholders. So there should be a basically a huge deficit, sometimes the trust deficit that is basically is not helping to towards the success for the successful completion of these restoration projects. Again, the same thing I'm repeating again and again, like it is well known, again, you tens of different again you more than 2 dozens of different indicators are written that who can be directly contributing to these sustainable economy, restoration of natural capital, or enrichment of knowledge. So this all things, everything then again directly or indirectly connected with this economic growth or general poverty alleviation or poverty reduction in our communities. Then again, so this is the last or second last slide. And again, this is a framework which tells you basically how the ecosystem restoration promotes the health of the ecosystem. And after promoting the health of the ecosystem, so it's going from left to right. So health of the ecosystem, then it increased ecosystem services. We have more cash flow into our primary stakeholders or secondary stakeholders or within our economies. And when we have more cash flow, healthy ecosystem, the health of the community and the resilience of the community or the adaptation of the community increases. And this all brings to the human well-being. And then again, as Janasa was talking, basically what ultimately we at the end we need is basically freedom, and human well-being is basically ultimate goal of all that work that basically has been started from last 1 or 2 decades. So this was the last slide, as I said. So I will try to sum up that what should be the take home message from this. We have to and we should adopt restoration of all the ecosystem at all different scales, and sustainable management of our ecosystems. We should involve all stakeholders, rights starting from children. We should also ask them, what are your problem? What do you think can be the solution? So exactly, I always get annoyed when we go to the people and tell them, this is a solution we thought for you. We never involve them So basically from children to all these primary, secondary stakeholders to financiers to all these politicians should be brought into the loop, and they should sit together and try to figure out how we can help our home, help starting from right from from house to town to city to all this. Then we have to remove the incentives. What we currently doing, we are incentivizing the degradation of our ecosystem. What we're doing, okay, produce 10 ton more wheat, 10 ton more cotton, and you will get more money. But what after 10 years, farmer would not have land anymore to cultivate. So basically we are incentivizing the degradation of the ecosystem. But we have to do is basically we have to incentivize the restoration. In China in 90s and 80s, they gave money to the farmer to to restore their lands. So we have to give them subsidy. We have to give them some incentives so that what they are losing at the moment, not pushing their lands to grow more. They need money, of course, so we have to invest, we have to subsidize our farmer or the people who are directly basically surviving on the money coming from these landscapes or the land ecosystems, so that they can basically start working or start helping us to restore the ecosystem. And then again, the last the relationship between the people and the nature must be of interdependence. We should not exploit each other as the human are exploiting each other. Similarly, we're exploiting our resources at the stake of losing them. So that's the take home message for this talk. And I think that's here I would end. So if I have been very cryptic in that, or people did not understand, they can.